Not many people know this, but I hail from a place called Canada in South Nyanza. Because it has such close proximity to Canada, we normally remove the Y and refer to ourselves as Canadians. So it came as a very interesting twist when my dad and my mom, who got married at a very early age, years later, as my dad was working as an extension officer and my mom as an untrained teacher, Mom got a letter from Canada, the real Canada with a C, offering her a scholarship to go and study for a 3-year degree, which she had not yet had the chance to achieve. So when my dad got this letter, he looked at it and he knew it was a sign from God, because how else would the real Canada call this wife of Canada to go and study there? The only problem was that they had 3 little girls, the eldest age 6, called Caroline, myself, I was 3 years old, and my younger sister, who was 9 months old. And how were they going to pull this off? So Dad and Mom put their heads together and they thought about how they could make this work, because they were very convinced that this was clearly a sign from God. So Mom thought about it. They put together their network of support, aunties, grandma, grandpa, anybody that they could call on. And finally, they settled on us going to stay with an aunt somewhere in the Kano Plains. Now, if you know where the Kano Plains are, you know that it rains a lot and it floods a lot. Now, my auntie was newly married with a young baby and suddenly finds herself with 3 young children to take care of. And this was challenging for her. And many a night, we found ourselves outside in the rain, in the rains in the plains of Kano, which we didn't know we were suffering, but it was really tough for us. In the midst of this, my dad had taken up a place at the University of Nairobi as a mature student to also pursue his BCom degree. And the way he tells this story is that one night, as he was sleeping, he dreamt that my baby sister was sick. And the next morning, he got on a bus, came all the way to Kano, and for sure, she was very ill. So he took us and got her into hospital, got her treated. And in the midst of this, he started to wonder, how does he make it work? His wife is gone, she's still young, and he's back in school, and he doesn't know how he's going to make this work. So his first move was to take us to Grandma, back to Canada, and where Grandma stayed with us for a while as he figured out what to do. At that time, I remember many of my uncles and his friends told him, your wife is gone, she's never coming back, she's still young, she's not even 30, and you don't really have children, because these are girls, they're not children. Just get another wife, have sons, and she'll help you raise these kids. But Dad was quite clear on what commitment him and Mom had made, and he was determined to make it work. A few months down the road, he managed to get a role at a college in Karen where he was to lecture, and this job was going to come with a house. So he thought, this is a good time to take my kids with me. He came down to the village, picked us up, and carried us with him to the village. He didn't yet have a house, so for a few months we were squatting with our better off relatives and just trying to make it work. Finally, he got his house, he moved in with us, and the first step he needed to do was to get us into school. Now at this point, I'm about 4 or 5 years. I don't know a word of English. I've never been to a school. My elder sister, Caroline, had started school while Mom was still there, and so she was a little bit better off. So now we need to get into school, and we're going to Karen C Primary School, and we have to take interviews. And I remember my dad sitting with us the whole evening and going through with me in English. When they say, what is your name? It means Nyinginga, which is Luo for what is your name? And this is what you say. You say, my name is Risper. And on, how old are you? And this is what you say. And when they say this, this is what you say. And the next day we went in for the interview. We were successful. We were admitted into school. But that was step 1, because I just still didn't know English. And so I went into school, a little village girl, don't really know what the swing is, terrified of the slide, and just trying to find my way in this big city. And the voice of my dad was very consistent. Don't be afraid, you will make it. You're just as good as anyone else. And throughout that time, he would teach me, he'd take time off. Once he's done with his studies, he'd sit with me and my sister, take us through, work us through, and make sure we understood what we needed to be successful in school. So in the first term with my language struggles, I came in last or close to the bottom. But for sure, by the end of the year, I was somewhere near the top. So his work really paid off. And it was that consistent encouragement, reassurance that I continued to see through the course of my life. 3 years down the road, Mom comes back. She's really elegant. We're not quite sure who she is. We didn't know what her mother is. And it took her time to work her way back into our lives. And Dad continued with his steadfastness. And some of the things I remember from my childhood is that he would take us to visit different types of Canadians. So there were those who were extremely well off, and he'd take us to see, these people are prominent lawyers, some are pilots. This is how you can be if you want to be that. He also took us to the more humble ones. I know we used to visit a cousin of mine that worked in a bar in Kaloleni. And what struck me was my dad was consistent, whether he was in Kaloleni at the pub or he was in Lavington at my relative's house. He didn't change the way he handled the people. He was kind, he was polite, he was empathetic, and he was confident in himself. He didn't treat you differently because of your social status or your wealth or your finances. The other thing I remember was when I was sitting my KCPE exams, Dad had a lot of confidence that our education is what would help us and it would be what would change our lives. And I remember him dropping me to school, and by that time we're in a different school. He would drop me to school, go to work, come back over lunch and bring me lunch. And this lunch had to be a whole fish, a whole dried fish. And I had to eat it right there, including demolishing the fish head and the brains and everything. Why? Because he believed, the brains of the fish would quickly transmit to my brain and then I would be successful. Well, he was right. I mean, I did pass the exams, but somehow I think it wasn't so much the fish head as the words of encouragement and the time he took to sit with me, not just during those lunches, but heading up to that exam. Fast forward again at university, at high school level, when I had to choose an option for what to study. By this time, Dad had hustled his way and gotten a job with a bank. He'd studied as an accountant, and he was there working really hard. And as I was thinking about my choices for what to do with my career, I looked at him, I looked at the challenges. By this time, they had had 4 more children, so 3 more girls and 1 boy. So you can imagine how exciting that house was. And I thought about the burden of school fees and all that needed to be done in order to get there. And so looking at my dad, I just thought, I can be an accountant. It's quick money, quick qualification, and I can help out over here. And when I told him that, he'd always wanted a doctor, but he didn't let his own ambitions stand in my way. And he said, look, if that's what you want, then you've got my backing. Going on to that, I finished high school and I wanted to study accounting, but I knew funds were limited. Dad's company was struggling, and so I couldn't ask for money for college. But then I took a step of faith. I went to Strathmore, sat for the aptitude test, and when it was done, they offered me a half scholarship. When I took that letter to Dad, he said, we can't let this go. He needed just 10,000 shillings, and he called his boss, he called everybody, and he made a plan. And throughout college, I just remember even going to Strathmore, he would drive, sometimes would be late because he didn't have fuel in the car, or he just preferred to drive down to empty and see what would happen. And we'd get late, and he would track the bus, chase after the bus, park in front of it, motion the driver, stop, and I'd have to jump out and run into the bus. And that was how far he would go, just to make sure that I got to get the chance to have a good education and to have a good start in life. And as I look back, and even after that, when I thought about who was I going to partner with in my life, my dad's qualities always come to mind, just the kind of support he has been to all of us. In my mind, he's the first feminist I ever met, the one who supported his wife to go away and study against all odds, the one who consistently encouraged us not to be disappointed or to allow anybody to intimidate us because we were female or because we were not so well off. He consistently spoke into our lives. So even when I thought about who to get married to, I ended up with more or less the same type of person. with both the positives and the negatives as well. But that was quite a role model of the kind of person that would help me achieve my ambitions, and together we would work for the good of the family. One other thing about my dad was around how he was a people person, and he still is. He's the kind of person who will see the president or whoever he is and say, you know, I saw you on TV and I went to school with your sister. And by the end of it, your farm friends, you know, he's not afraid to go out there and try. And if you reject him, so what? He's back to the same place. So he constantly taught me, just ask, you know, what could go wrong? After all, if people reject you, you'll be back in the same place. So even in that, I saw qualities that have toughened me up, that have taught me to ask and keep asking. As I grow older, I also find that I have become more and more my father's daughter. My dad loved to have people in the house. He would invite all his relatives who had not gone to the village over Christmas, and Christmas would be a time of making chapati for my sisters and I. And he just loved people. At that time, I found it very challenging. We would cook the whole day. But now I willingly do that. I willingly invite lots of people into my house and do the same for them, except in times of Corona, obviously. Yeah. So my dad, in summary, he's been a hallmark in my life. He's been an epitome of somebody who goes beyond in everything that he does. And even though he didn't say so much, it's the things that he's done and the effort he's put into our lives and all my siblings that we found ourselves following in his footsteps and consistently pushing ourselves to do more. Dad, John Alex Genga, thank you so much for being the first feminist in my life, for believing in me and my siblings, and for always letting us know that it doesn't matter who we are, what our status in life is, or how much money we have, that we can always overcome all our boundaries and all our obstacles and be the best that we can be.